In a lot of the work we do with Django, we deal with the user authentication system. We have a general user class that people can use to register, but a lot of times we want to add that little bit of extra information when a user registers, or we want to have extra information later that the user can add. Generally, this is profile data. Django doesn't really offer a way to deal with profiles. However, there is an easy concept to dealing with it. You just create a one-to-one field with the user object, or you create a custom user. In this video, we're going to go over creating a custom profile object and attaching it to the built-in user object. This generally covers 90 to 95% of use cases in dealing with the user object. So as such, we're just going to quickly run through how to do that. First thing let's do is let's take a look at our app a little bit. We have a general demo project with a registration app. The only custom thing that we've done so far is come up with a custom registration view because we're using all of the default login and logout management system that comes with Django. So if we look at our view for registration, you can see we have a form view and it's called registration view. The form class that we're using is the built-in contrib.Auth form for user creation form, and this is for creating a user object. We set the template name and we set the success URL of login so that when we test this, it can just immediately create and then ship us over to the login page. And then for the form valid, we're saying, hey, if it's a valid form, just do a form.save, since the user creation form is a model form. So with that, that's it for our registration view and being able to create a basic user. Since we have that done, we need to go ahead and create our database and run migrations for our entire system. Note it runs all the basic built-in migrations and nothing that we've added yet that we've personally written, because all that we've really done is we've included URLs for the auth system and we've added a registration app and created a custom view for that. So with that, if we'll jump into the browser, and you can see our index page basically says we're not logged in. Go to the login page. This is a standard login page. But let's go ahead and go to register. And we can create a new user. We'll do test user 1, create a password. In this case, I'm doing password 1. And we'll just click register. And there we go. We go back to our login page because we've successfully registered. Just to verify, we can do it again with test user 2, register, and there we are. So let's go ahead and log in with test user 1, with password 1 as our password. And there we are, we're back at our home page. It prompts us with a link to log out, and it says that we are logged in. If we had a profile attached to this, we would actually see a little bit more information. Since there's no profile object attached to the two users that we created, we're not going to see that yet. So now let's go ahead and log out and see it uses the built-in logout mechanism, so it goes to the Django admin. I haven't bothered to customize it yet. With our first demonstration out of the way, let's go ahead and look at creating our profile object. We'll open up our registration models, go down and create a new class, a new model called profile, inherit from models.model. We're going to create a user field, and it's going to be a one-to-one field with the auth user model, with the user model in our contrib.Auth system. This is going to create a direct relationship with the user model, and we can only have one record for the user. We're also going to create a city just so that we can say, hey, we're actually adding extra data besides creating this random profile object. We're going to set the max length to 255. We're going to set the default to my city so that we can just hurry up and see some information in our testing. So with that, we have our user profile object. Now we just need to create our migration for it and then run those migrations. Now if we go into our browser, go in and register with test user 3, and when we log in with test user 3, we still have our login successfully. Go ahead and log out for a second. We'll go back to our terminal and we'll go into the shell. Let's go ahead and get the user that we just created, doing the latest by ID. So we have our user of test user 3. Now when we do user.profile, you can see, boom, it errors. It throws an exception. We get this related object does not exist. And that's because we haven't created a profile object that is attached to the user object. In our registration step, the only thing that we've done is create the user object. So what we have to do is every time that we create a user object, we have to create the profile object. There can be a lot of ways to do this. One way is we override the save method of the user object. Unfortunately, the user object is in contrib.Auth, so that makes it a little difficult to do it. In the registration step, we can create the new user with that form.save, grab that user out, and then create a profile object. But what happens if we create a user in a different way? That's not going to create that profile object. And if we go to use our profile somewhere in code besides in our templates, it's going to throw this error. So we have to come up with a way to create the user profile object for a user every time one's created. To do that, we're going to use Django's built-in signals. It comes with a post save signal, and we can wire it up to use the user. So if we open up our models, we'll go down and we'll start with a new decorator called receiver. So we're going to receive a signal call. We're going to say this would be for a post save, and the sender is going to be the user. So every time the user object in our system sends out and says, hey, I just got done saving, and here's the information about that saving, we're going to process it here with this function. We're going to create the function. Really, this name doesn't matter. You could do def doodad because the decorator is what really matters in this case. We're going to set sender for our first parameter and kwargs for our second parameter, and then we'll pull stuff out of the kwarg. First, we need to get the user object that was just created, so we'll do kwargs.get instance because it passed in instance. We're going to get created. This is going to be a Boolean value to check, hey, was this user created or was it just updated? Because a post save will happen every time you update a user as well. We're going to check if it was created, then we're going to go ahead and get a profile object, and then we're just going to create a new one, and we're going to use the user object that we pulled out of our kwargs. And that's it. That's all there is to creating a profile object and attaching it to a new user object that's been created every time you create a new user. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump into our browser and create a new user. If we go to our registration page, we'll just create a test user 5, hit the register button, and there we go, we have our new user. Go ahead and log in with test user 5, and now we're back on our home page, and you see we can log out, it says you are logged in, and there's my city. So it's using data from our profile object because it automatically created one. Let's go ahead and jump back into our terminal and open up our shell. If we get our latest user, so that's going to be our test user 5, you can see we do user.profile and we get the profile data. We can see that we do our user.profile.city, and that gets the city that was automatically populated. And then just for being pedantic, we'll do profile equals user.profile and then profile.user to see that we get the test user 5 user. So that leads to the next part where only from now on is a profile object going to be created for a user. So that means all of those users that we just created earlier are not going to have a profile object. We need to actually go ahead and rectify that. How we're going to do that is we're going to do a query. We're going to do for every user in our user.objects and do a filter for profile is null equals true. So every user that does not have a profile because it's set to null, we're going to pull out. So the other test users that we created. We're going to loop through that, and then we're just going to do a profile.objects.create and use the user object from our loop. And that's it. Now all of our users have a profile object attached to them, and so now we shouldn't get any errors in our code anywhere. And we can test that by just grabbing out the second user we created and doing user.profile to see, hey, a user profile object has been attached. And that's really it. That's all there really is to doing a user profile. It's fairly simple to just create a user profile object and then subscribe to the post save signal for the user object, and then create the profile object whenever the user's been created. And then it just kind of works. We went through a lot of examples just showing everything working in different ways. So I hope you kind of get a good feel for how to do it, and I hope you consider using this whenever you need to deal with doing profile stuff in your code.